God is consistent in His nature and His character. We will not escape what is coming. And the answer will not be suffice to say, well, we passed it on up. They should have done something about it. When you think about this, how did the American Revolution get resolved? How did the women's suffrage movement get resolved? How did the civil rights movement get resolved? It got resolved by people mobilizing.
And
by
pushing
people
back
being fed up with it. That's right, being fed up with it and mobilizing and pushing back against the powers that were in control. And when they mobilized large enough, their voices were heard because the powers to be realized, oh, well, they're about to hold me accountable, so I'm going to have an answer for this because I can't keep passing things off anymore, right? And so that's what... Go ahead.
Well, just as an interesting kind of parallel and observation to draw out how the severity of how it can be, but to consider the comparable reality now is during during the era when slavery existed in the United States. There was a time when there were so many African slaves in the U.S., people in slavery that. It was a great fear of their slave masters and owners because they were often outnumbered, perhaps on a plantation and that kind of thing. So they had to impose. They didn't actually have the ability to keep the people physically, but the part that kept them in slavery was, of course, a force from above with guns and weapons and the system that's there to impose it on them. But and in a society that's conditioned to accept this reality, but then even in the slave, an acceptance of this reality that they couldn't do anything to change it, that this was somehow
it's just
their lot in life.
It's the way it is, the way everybody does it.
And even the people who knew that it was wrong and wanted to resist it, they were often kept in place by the other slaves around them who didn't want them to stir up trouble. And that's a reality. They would have faced backlash. They would have been whipped, perhaps killed, or tortured in other ways that are even worse. So it's a powerful, effective way to coerce and control people. But so consider the parallels now and all the various ways that we're kind of
I just
kept
heard
in
this.
bondage.
I hear this in the school system all the time. There's nothing we can do about it. We just have to do what they tell us to do. And I'm like, that is exactly what you're talking about. No, we don't have to do what they tell us to do. We do what they tell us to do because they've mentally put us in chains. Right? We think there is no other way, but there is another way. And we're going to be looking into those other ways, by the way.
In that instance, maybe you depend on them for some financial
That's right.
Support.
More than you ought to. Maybe you slowly have been pushing off that responsibility for their money, right? And they've loved it. Big government loves that, by the way. Give them all that, and they just love it because they eat it up.
They make you give them your money, and then they make you do what they say in order to give it back to you.
give it back to you. That's right. Exactly. I just brought up three things: American Revolution, women's suffrage, and civil rights. So what are we talking about in terms of what is our obligation as citizens of Dalton, Georgia? And by the way, you don't have to be in Dalton, Georgia. Your community is probably exactly the same, right? I mean, our goal is for small communities to rise up and start to push back and take their communities back, right? And we're going to be talking about that, about steps that we can take as we move forward together. There's four fundamental ways that I see. Number one, we need to be a community that prays more. I'm guilty of this. I think we're all guilty of this. We really don't pray the way that we ought to pray. We don't really believe, I think, that God is in the business of changing things through prayer. We need to be informed on the issues. Like Dustin was saying earlier, we've prioritized all these other things, man. We can tell you the best things about ESPN and our new TV show and what our kids are doing right now in sports and all that, but we can't. And we're angry about all these issues, but when you start to ask people about the issues, they're like, they come off very unintelligent because we haven't really looked at the issues and we don't know how to process the information and then work through the information and how the system works. So we need to understand and be informed on those issues. And we're going to do that. We're going to try to do a better job on the show of informing you on these things. And then we need to vote. And then after we vote, this is very important, we need to hold our election officials accountable. We need to hold them accountable. So let's talk about, I don't want to make this about voter fraud, right? That we've done videos on that. I don't want to make, our voter irregularities YouTube. I'm sorry. Not voter fraud, voter irregularities, right? But for instance, we're all moving past this whole voting thing, right? This whole election. We're just moving past it. We're just letting it go. And I've sat down with a number of people that wanted to talk to me because of this show that me and Dustin have done. And they've been like, just show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. The court said there was no evidence. Like I said, they never heard the case. Yeah, because there was no evidence. There was nothing that merited to even go to court. And I was like, okay, let me just give you this very, very simply, right? Very simply. And I'll ask these 3 questions. Joe Biden was the most popular president in American history.
That's not a question.
I lay these things out, to which everyone laughs or chuckles, or even if you voted for him, you laugh or you chuckle.
It's a factual statement that is absurd.
It's absurd, right? I mean, you just go back and look before the election. He had nobody show up at anything that he did, okay? It's absurd. But it gets worse, right? Bellwether counties. Okay, bellwether counties, there's 19 of them in the United States. And bellwether counties are supposed to be counties that are representative of the whole of America. And historically speaking, anyone that has won an election has won the bellwether counties. It's kind of a good indicator of who's going to win the election.
A very precise indicator.
Very precise indicator.
Not just kind of good.
Yeah,
but
it's very precise.
That's the reason it is
That's right.
what it is.
That's right. Trump won 18 out of 19 bellwether counties. 18 out of the 19 bellwether counties went to Trump. It gets worse. The next one. Trump outperformed expectations in Los Angeles, San Francisco. This is with minorities too, Latino and black voters, than he did in 2016. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, all these major areas that are extremely liberal, Trump did better. Joe Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton and Obama. Remember, this is the most popular president in American history, way more popular than Obama, way more popular than Clinton. He underperformed them in every one of those counties and in all these other areas except for 4 or 5 counties. And I'll let you guess, but I'll tell you, but I think you could probably guess them. Number 1 is Phoenix, Arizona, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Detroit, and Atlanta. Do those 5 cities ring a bell? The 5 swing states and the major counties inside of them are the only counties that Biden outperformed Obama and Hillary Clinton. And Trump did better in every area outside above 2016. He only did better.
Well, let's add on to that
I knew you were gonna
statistical
keep going.
element. Because,
But that's enough, by the way.
but on top of that, each of those states stopped counting.
They had problems.
Stopped counting on election night, which doesn't happen. Historically hasn't happened. And they may not have been the only places that did. I'm not positive on that, but they all did, and they were the main places that did.
That's right.
And not only that, when they stopped, President Trump had a pretty significant lead in most of those places, including like upwards to 600,000-700,000 or more votes in Pennsylvania. Hundreds of thousands in each of these states. Trump goes into the night ahead by. And then there are massive infusions of votes through the night that catches Biden up. And then there are the influx of late mail-in ballots that continue to arrive in each of those states where each of the laws had been changed and influenced by, various forces along the way.
And so this is what they say has no merit, right? This is what they say has no merit. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean it has? How does that not have merit? And they try to write it off as a statistical anomaly. It's a statistical,
It's way more of a statistical anomaly that Joe Biden won. Is that not the irony?
But here's the thing that blows my mind. Could you imagine if this would have been flipped and Trump would have won this way? Could you only imagine what it would have been
we don't
like?
have to imagine
I know,
because
but
we've seen it for the last 5 years.
I know. So my point is this. I don't want to make this about election fraud, like I said. But my point is this. Or election irregularities. Don't pull us down YouTube. We're sorry. There was no fraud. There was no fraud that changed the election results. I have to say that for YouTube. But my point is like the absurdity of what we just said in like 6, 7, 8 minutes, and the fact that people go, well, the cases had no merit. It just shows how absurd we've become. But the fact that we're just ready to move on past that and just go, well, it is what it is. If you don't think voter integrity is going to be the battle of our life from here on out, you're wrong. We just allowed something to happen that is going to set a precedent moving forward that we're going to have to fight. I mean, right now, Bill HB 531 is trying to be passed in Georgia for this very reason. Because we all know that it happened. We all know that it did. Even the other side knows that it happens unless they're just, that 20, 30% that's just lost their mind because they've never looked at it. And some of them I understand. No, I don't. I don't understand it anymore because at this point, I used to be compassionate about it and go, all right, I understand if you only listen. But there's been enough information that's come out that you could have not listened to.
Well, you understand why it's the case, but it's still inexcusable.
Sure.
Right. I mean, you get that people's biases influence their even willingness to hear and consider information.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we understand why it's the case. We even understand many of the people in the middle or even on the right who refuse to tackle the issue because of the challenge, the difficulty, the way in which the system is imposing from the top down a resistance to even acknowledging this narrative. They're forcing a narrative onto history that is not going to work. It's not going to work. And because we must be unwilling to accept it if we hope to move forward. Because if we move forward on this lie, then there can only be judgment upon this nation. That's the only possible outcome.
Well, speaks Isaiah 10, right? Speaks Isaiah 10. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? To whom will you run for help? If the Christian person does not stand up against injustice, then we are in a lot of trouble, right? And so our goal on this show moving forward is going to help educate you in the issues and how we got to this point, because we didn't just wake up and get here, right? How we got here, the issues surrounding our community and our state, because that's what we feel obligated to do, and who we need to be holding accountable. That's right, personally. Who is accountable for these things? Who do we need to be calling? Who do we need to be dealing with? So what we need from you guys is to share these things as we try to educate our community on the issues. Point people to this because we're going to try to make good content videos that help educate our community so that we can start to learn and grow together. And eventually when we come to mobilize together, we're not having to start from the bottom up, right? We already kind of have an idea of what we're mobilizing around, the issues that we need to be taking on head on. So,
and that ends with, to whom will you run for help? And what we are guilty of running to help from those who have been positioned above us, but who we have positioned above us because we desire to be ruled by men. Yeah. And so we look up the food chain, up the organizational chart, up the levels of responsibility, and there is a responsibility level there. And I'm not suggesting that those organizations are bad, but who we really need to look to for help is up, but to God. Yep. Because only God knows what the truth is, and in confronting God on these matters, God will both humble us to see that we are in the wrong in so many ways
Yeah.
in this world, and in terms of our focus and our priorities, where our hearts are, and what we are willing to do. Are we willing to be uncomfortable for what is right and good and true for the sake of a greater good, in service to those who we are put in charge by God to shepherd their lives, and specifically our own families, for the sake of our children and future generations? Will we do the hard things that require effort
And sacrifice.
diligence and
Sacrifice.
and we need to be informed. So it's true that we are being deceived and conditioned by forces from without, but we are susceptible to that because we have given in to the force within that lures us into passivity, in our own desire to be satisfied by lesser things.
And all those out there that go, man, I would love to get involved with, mobilize with you guys, but I just don't have time. That's what we're talking about, right? The sacrifice of your time, of the things that you're going to have to fix this, guys, to fix this problem. We are going to have to totally reorient our lives and what we spend our time on. That's the only way this gets fixed. You can't fit this in 15 minutes a day, right? You can't know the Lord with a 5-minute Bible study every morning. Ooh, I know, daily breaders, I'm sorry. That's not good enough, right? That's not. We act like we don't have any time. We have a ton of time. The question is, where do we put it? And that does truly tell what is important to us. So I'm tired of people being angry about the issues surrounding our community, but just saying, I don't have enough time to do anything about it. You're really not angry about it. You really don't care about what's happening to this community and the direction of our children. You really don't. You really don't.
Combined with the reality that you may not realize how serious the problem is. And that is part of the problem because we have neglected our responsibility to be informed. So it's a circular
That was a good place
pattern.
to soften it up a little bit.
Good balance here, and again, though we are passionate about these things and we seek to be informed, and we've made efforts, perhaps more than some, we still recognize, each of us need to recognize our own faults in it, and to seek how we can be better informed and become more involved and play. I mean, the guilt for me is just, I might be informed about it, but then do I do enough about it? I might talk to you about it, but do I call that congressperson or whatever it is?
And that's what we want to be. We want to provide a platform to ultimately
show up to that
do.
meeting.
Right. That's what we want this platform to become, a mobilizing so that we can do. So we don't want to be on here just talking about these issues all the time. We want to create a platform of people, and we're not looking to have hundreds of thousands of followers all over the country. We're looking for 1,000 followers in Dalton to be in tune, so that we see that number. We're like, all right, now it's time to start setting up in-person meetings so that we can start to talk about where are we going to go next? Who are we going to hold accountable next? What's the next step, right? And that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take for all the people in Dalton and Whitfield County, and hopefully North Georgia. Hopefully this becomes a North Georgia thing. And then you know what? From North Georgia, we'll go to the state of Georgia, and hopefully we can grow out from there. So are you wanting to read something, Jeremiah?
No, I'm
gonna read something then if you're not.
Okay, that you saw?
No, not in
something
Jeremiah.
else.
Go ahead. I'm gonna go to Proverbs here. This to me, you said something very important. Maybe we don't see the problem, or maybe the sense of urgency is just not there. And for me, this right here, even in my family and in my walk with the Lord, provides the sense of urgency, right? And here it is. Wisdom cries out aloud in the streets, and in the market she raises her voice, and at the head of the noisy street she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will you scoffers delight in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you, because I have called, and you I will make my words known to you. Because I have called, and you refused to listen, have stretched out my hand, and no one has heeded it, because you have ignored all my counsel. and would not have none of my reproof, I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when the terror strikes you, when the terror strikes you like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when the distress and anguish comes upon you. Then they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. Would have none of my counsel and despise all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat of the fruit of their ways and their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by the turning away, and the complacencies of fools destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster. I don't think we can change things on a federal level. I don't think they'll listen to that proverb, Proverbs 1 there, 18 and on. I don't think they'll listen to it. I don't think the state right now would even listen to it. But if our so-called conservative Christian community in Dalton and Whitfield County, that's what we call ourselves, if we will not listen to it because we want to pass it on to the state and then pass it on to the federal level, then we too deserve everything that proverb says. God is consistent in his nature and his character. We will not escape what is coming. And the answer will not be suffice to say, well, we passed it on up. They should have done something about it. That will not be a good excuse. So our hope and our heart is to help push back in Whitfield County, Dalton, Georgia, North Georgia, as we move forward in what is coming down the pipe.
And God said, if you will turn at my reproof,
yes,
the reproof of wisdom.
Yes.
And Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God.
Yes.
And so God is calling us in this moment to turn at his reproof and being made aware of the problem and seeing our own fault in it. And if you do that, I will pour my Spirit out on you.
Yes.
Jesus is eager to pour his Spirit out upon us to help us in this moment and heal our land as we would return to him and truly be his people who follow him wherever he may lead. And that is to uncomfortable places. Yeah. But ultimately we do that because beyond that cross is a resurrection into eternal life and the glory of God that we will participate in as his people forever. And so whatever discomfort we might have to go through now, in whatever way we may face some form of persecution or ridicule or pressure from society around us, it pales in comparison to both facing the judgment of a holy God who demands his people carry out his justice and his character in the world, but also the retribution and the final reward that he'll have that has been purchased by his Son and is promised to be given to all those who join in God's family as his adopted children. So in that, we are truly set free in Christ to give ourselves to such efforts. And for each person, it's going to look different, but it needs to be something. And it needs to be something more, very likely.
Amen.
For me, you, and everybody.
Amen. So I hope to see you guys in the next episode as we start to touch on these issues and things in ways in which we can pray over these issues, be informed over these issues, vote over these issues, and mobilize and hold our elected officials accountable over these issues.